Okay, part four of counseling and the helping relationship. We have the constructivist therapy, constructivist therapy. The newer constructivist theories of intervention stress that it is imperative that we as helpers understand the client's view, also known as constructs. So the constructivist theories suggest that we as helpers understand the client's views, that we understand their constructs. And this helps to explain his or her problems. The constructs explain his or her problems. Their view explains his or her problems. Two popular classes of constructivist therapy are brief therapy, which examines what worked for a client in the past, and narrative therapy looks at the stories in the client's life and attempts to rewrite or reconstruct the stories when necessary. So, two popular classes of constructivist therapy are brief therapy, examining what worked in the past, and narrative therapy, looking at the client's life and attempt to rewrite it or reconstruct the stories when necessary. Then we have Henry Murray. Henry Murray was the creator of the thematic apperception test, TAT. So we know we're going to see TAT on the exam. So TAT, which is the thematic apperception test, is a projective test where the client is shown a series of pictures and asked to tell a story. It was introduced by Murray in 1938 Explorations in Personality. So Henry Murray created the TAT test, which is a projective test where the client is shown a series of pictures. So TAT test is pictures. And then they're asked to tell a story based off those pictures. Henry Murray termed the study of personality as personology. So we have, just to kind of go back a little bit, because it's a familiar term, we have nosology, which is the branch of medicine that concerns itself with the classification of disease. And then we have personology, which is the study of personality. And that was termed by Henry Murray, who created the TAT testing, thematic apperception test, which is a projective test used by Freud, psychoanalysis, analytic therapist or theorist, where they're shown pictures and then they create a story. A box of things to know. We have Abraham Maslow, who created the hierarchy of needs. Also, things to know: cognitive therapy strategies such as REBT, rational motive behavior therapy, includes rational self talk and rational thinking. Because remember, REBT is a cognitive therapy strategy created by Albert Ellis, where the goal is to have um, rational emotions and behavioral responses. You want to think logically, rationally. So, rational self talking and rational thinking are strategies used in REBT and cognitive therapy. We have ACT therapy. It was created by Steve Hayes. It does not focus on symptom reduction. No symptom reduction here. What it wants clients to take effective action in their lives. So it does not have symptom reduction. It's not like behavior is where, they want to improve the reaction. It's not about changing or reducing the symptoms. What it wants instead is for clients to take effective action in their lives. The goal is to perceive feelings and thoughts as harmless, albeit uncomfortable. So, in ACT therapy, you're almost embracing those feelings and those thoughts. So, yeah, it's uncomfortable to have anxiety, but you're going to start, you're going to learn to perceive your anxiety as harmless. You don't have to push it away, you don't have to reduce the symptoms, but you learn to see it that as this is something that's uncomfortable, but it's harmless. According to ACT, most of us will experience psychological suffering as a result of our own mental processes. So we think ourselves into psychological suffering. Therapy is aimed at helping clients to stop struggling with their private experiences and to assist them in taking action toward the life they want. So instead of you fighting and beating yourself up about um, the symptoms that you have, you move forward in life. You understand that it's there. You embrace it for what it is as a part of your life, see it as harmless, and you move forward. And that's ACT therapy that was created by Steve Hayes. Okay, sorry. I was looking for something. Okay, so what I was looking for is under behaviorists. So, behaviorists, which are rivals to analysts, they strive for symptom reduction and do not believe in the concept of symptom substitution. So that's what I was looking for because I'm like, I know behaviorists, you think desensitized, they want to improve the symptoms or the reaction, but in contrast, they do not believe in the concept of symptom substitution. While in ACT therapy, there's no symptom reduction. All right. So moving forward, we have extensionalism. Extension Extensionalism is a humanistic form. So Existentialism is a humanistic form. It's based in the counselor helping the client discover meaning in his or her life by doing a deed, experiencing a value, or suffering. So, extensionalism, you always want to think helping to find a meaning. It rejects analysis and behaviorism for being deterministic and simplistic. So, because behavioral, both analysts and behavioralists, they want to push towards certain goals. So that's why they believe it's deterministic, and then it's simplistic because it just truly doesn't explore like the present, the meaning. It stresses growth and self actualization on the here and now and the future. So we know psychoanalysts, they believe it's from your unconscious in your childhood. Behaviorists, they are more concerned with changing the behavior. So extensionalism, they want to focus and stress growth and self actualization in the here and now and the future. It charged that it is not a systematic approach to treatment. It rejects traditional diagnosis and assessment procedures. So it rejects traditional diagnosis and assessment procedures. It is a type of philosophy for helping. Is often compared to logotherapy, which is a brand of psychotherapy, while behaviorism is a type of psychology or a brand of treatment. That was just like a specific question from the Purple Book, in comparing logotherapy to behaviorism. Logotherapy is a brand of psychotherapy, while behaviorism is a type of psychology or a brand of treatment. Um, Logotherapy grew out of extensionalism and associationism grew out of behaviorism. So that's just another comparison. So logotherapy grew out of extensionalism. And then associationism grew out of behaviorism. Associationism asserts that ideas are held together by associations. The pioneers for associationism is John Locke, David Hume, James Mill, or David Hartley, but typically you'll see John Locke, which we know he's a pioneer in the behaviorist movement. So, going back to logotherapy, which derived out of extensionalism, the, the philosophy of helping. Extensionalism believes in the horizontal relationship, so there's equality between client and counselor. We have individuals who are important to extensionalism, who is Rollo May. He's a prime mover in existential counseling movement and introduced existential therapy into the United States. That's Rollo May. Rollo May makes me think about that chocolate. I think it's like a Rollo. It's like a chocolate. They're like little circles in a roll. Um, I don't know why that just came to my mind. But Rollo May is a prime mover, a roller, in essential counseling movement and introduced essential therapy into the United States. Viktor Frankl is the father of logotherapy, which is based in extensionalism. Logotherapy is healing through meaning. Logotherapy is healing through meaning. I have a word. It looks like neogenic, but I don't know if it's neogenic neurosis. That is the frustration of the will to meaning. So, neogenic neurosis, the frustration of the will to meaning. Um, Logotherapy believes that death is not evil, but an entity which gives meaning to the process of life. So, logotherapy is healing through meaning. Therefore, death is not evil, but an entity which gives meaning to the process of life. Viktor Frankl, um, along with being the father of logotherapy, healing through meaning. He's the father of paradoxical intention. Paradoxical intention implemented by advising the client to purposely exaggerate a dysfunctional behavior in the imagination. So Viktor Frankl is the father of paradoxical intention, which is advising the client to purposely exaggerate a dysfunctional or maladaptive behavior um, in the imagination. Hmm. So earlier we learned about Alfred Adler. Alfred Adler was one of the first therapists who relied on paradox. So that's important to note is that Alfred Adler relied on was one of the first to rely on paradox, but he was not the founder of it. The founder of paradox is Viktor Frankl, Mr. Logotherapy. Viktor Frankl stressed that individuals have choices in their lives and one cannot blame others or childhood circumstances for the lack of fulfillment. So he stressed that individuals have choices in their lives and one cannot blame others or childhood circumstances for the lack of fulfillment because again it goes against analysis and behaviorism. We have Irvin Yalom. He's noted for his work in group therapy. Under essentialism, we have Umwelt, 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 which is the physical world, Mitwelt, which is the relationship world, and then Egenwelt, which is identity world. So if we can remember Mitwelt, Mitwelt, Mit my relationship in the world. Egenwelt, Eigen, Egen, identity world. So Eigen, identity, Mit my relationship, like my partner, my friend, my mom, my relationships. And then the world will be the remaining one, which is the physical world. Phenomenology is the client's internal personal experience of events. So, phenomenology is the client's internal personal experience of events. Ontology, the philosophy of being and existing, is the study of life experience. Ontology. Ontology, the philosophy of being and existing, study of life experience. Phenomenology, the client's internal personal experience of events. And then we have Berber and Jaspers, who are associated with the existential therapy. All right, moving on, we have humanistic. So, humanistic, sometimes called the third force psychology, because it was a reaction to behaviorism and psychoanalysis, the two initial forces at the time. So, we have psychoanalysis by Freud, first, the oldest. Then we have behaviorism, who kind of counteracted psychoanalysis, and then we have humanistic, that would be the third, and then let's just say from humanistic existentialism, because like humanistic is about the person, and then existentialism is more so about the person, but their future, the meaning behind things that happened. Like, let's go deeper and examine. So, Carl Rogers falls under humanistic. Okay, so we have Carl Rogers, who's the father of person centered therapy. This therapy, person centered, which of course began as non directive and then to client centered, now to person centered. It believes that individuals are good and they move towards growth and self actualization. So, the individual is good and moves toward growth and self actualization. Carl Rogers, father of person centered, can also be labeled as Rogerian. It does not emphasize the diagnosis nor advice giving. So, just like extensionalism, it does not emphasize or believe. Extensionalism, let's just say, comes after humanistic. So, it's humanistic and person centered does not emphasize diagnosis. Extensionalism does not support assessment or diagnosis whatsoever. So, going back to person centered, it also does not believe in advice giving because it's person centered. Um, person centered popularized unconditional positive regard. It popularized unconditional positive regard, saying the counselor must care for the client even when the counselor is uncomfortable or disagrees with the client's position. So, unconditional positive regard, meaning that the counselor cares for the client and even when they are uncomfortable or disagrees with the client's position. School Rogerians School of Counseling, created by Carl Rogers, went through three name changes: non directive to client centered to person centered. The initial name was to set it apart from analytic and directive models. It can also be known as the self theory because, there's no advice giving. You're talking it out and understanding for yourself. When used in career counseling, the role of the self concept in terms of career choice is illuminated. So, what is it that the role of your self concept is illuminated in terms of career counseling? A strict Rogerian would generally not give the client specific techniques for behavioral change or instruct the person how to think. So you don't want to give them techniques that will change their behavior. You want them to, be true to themselves, and you don't want to instruct them how to think, because you want them again to just remain, in a sense, remain true to their own thoughts and beliefs. So, giving advice is one of the most debated issues in counseling. Some texts classify advice giving along with lecturing and excessive questioning as a non helpful behavior. So, some texts would say that advice giving, lecturing, and excessive questions are not helpful behaviors. Its experts insist that lecturing or preaching is merely a variation of advice giving and can foster a power struggle between the counselor and the client. Advice giving in the initial sessions can keep a client from working through his or her feelings. In crisis or emergency situations, advice giving is generally considered an appropriate intervention. Because, in crisis or emergency, they, they are needing a little more help based off like a very abnormal event occurring. So, in a crisis or emergency situation, advice giving would generally be considered appropriate. Multicultural experts wisely point out that some groups, such as Asian cultures, view counseling as a last resort in which immediate direction is given to the client. So, I think we discussed this in the social and multicultural section that Asian cultures typically prefer directive counseling versus non-directive. Like they like to um, their counselors to be like in an authority position. So under Carl Rogers, person centered, there's the conditions for growth. Conditions for growth in a therapeutic atmosphere produces a climate for growth. So, conditions for growth and a therapeutic atmosphere, both of those things produce a climate for growth. So, the conditions for growth is when the counselor provides genuineness or congruence. Congruence is being in the relationship, unconditional positive regard, meaning non judgmental acceptance, and empathetic understanding. So, conditions for growth is when the counselor provides genuineness, unconditional positive regard, and empath- empathetic understanding. Person centered has an optimistic view concerning human nature, believing that we have an inborn tendency toward self actualization. The client's traits have an even greater impact on the success of psychotherapy. So the client's traits have an even greater impact on the success of psychotherapy. And that was person centered, which falls under humanistic. So then we're moving on to Fitz Perls, who's the father of Gestalt therapy. So Gestalt means whole, a form, figure, or configuration unified as a whole. The whole is greater than the sum of parts. So Gestalt means whole, and Gestalt therapy means that the whole is greater than the sum of parts. Growth takes place when the client has integrated disowned parts of the personality and reconnected with them. So if you remember that Gestalt means whole, and that the whole being is greater than some parts. So you don't nitpick, like, oh, I'm such a great mom, but I was such a poor daughter. Instead of focusing on those different parts and those different roles, you're going to integrate all the parts of you, the mom, the sister, the daughter, the wife. You're going to integrate all of who you are, even those disowned parts of the personality, and reconnect with them. So Gestalt therapy emphasizes an increasing psychological as well as bodily awareness. So psychologically being whole, and then as well as bodily awareness. Gestalt emphasizes confrontation. So, confrontation occurs when the therapist points out discrepancies or incongruencies between the client's verbal and nonverbal behaviors. The concepts used or also called Gestalt games of dialogue. So concepts used in Gestalt are also called Gestalt games of dialogue. That would be the empty chair technique. It allows the client to work on opposing feelings. The underdog, seen as weak, powerless, passive, and full of excuses. The top dog is similar to the critical parent, the oughts, shoulds, woulds, um, just criticizing and being judgmental, which is the top dog. Playing the projection technique, which is acting like the person you dislike. Converting questions to statements, so that would be the use of I statement, um, taking an I statement from a generalized question. So converting questions to statements. So when someone, like, when the client asks the counselor, do you feel like what I did was wrong? You convert that to an I statement. I feel like there's a chance that what I did was wrong, but I also feel like, I was right in it. So it's taking responsibility for a feeling or a situation by converting that question to a statement. Gestalt is concerned with the here and now when trying, and we know that person centered is also concerned with the here and now. No, I'm sorry. Gestalt is concerned with the here and now, and we know that existentialism was also focused on the here and now because it's the meaning of the here and now in the future. But going back to Gestalt, it's focused on the here and now. When trying to avoid a feeling, the counselor urges the client to face it or to stay with the feeling, which is necessary for growth. Dream work is an integral part of Gestalt therapy. The client is told to recount the dream as if it is happening in the present. So everything in the dream is considered a projection of the self. It emphasizes experience rather than interpretation, which is a which is attractive for group intervention. So, just thought emphasizes the experience of the dream or experience of an event or situation rather than the interpretation. So I went to a birthday dinner, and it was chaotic, but we were able to laugh and have fun, and it was a little awkward because my bill came and I couldn't pay for it for some reason. um, it would emphasize the experience. Like you still had a good time, you were still able to laugh about it rather than that interpretation, meaning, oh, they're going to judge me, or oh, they were thinking this, or however you could have interpreted. And that's attractive for group intervention. It utilizes the exaggeration experiment, which is paradox, as practiced by Viktor Frankl, who created the paradox of intention, um, Jay Haley, and Erickson, and that's Milton Erickson with a C. Perels emphasize the exaggeration in regard to present moment, verbal and nonverbal behavior in the here and now. It uses what questions. So, what questions are seen as more valuable than why? So, extensionalism is would be why questions because it wants to understand the meaning, versus just thought, which is a little confrontational, is what. So, what does that mean? What was the experience? What role did you play? You know, what are your feelings? So it uses what questions are seen as more valuable than why questions. The goal is to remove it talk and replace it with I statements. So that's why converting questions to statements is important because it wants to remove the it talk and replace it with I statements for that accountability. Psychodrama, it uses psychodrama, and psychodrama incorporates role playing into the treatment process. So, psychodrama was invented by Jacob Marino, who first coined group therapy. Okay, so yeah, that's what we know. Um, let's see. All right. So it uses psychodrama. Gestalt uses psychodrama, which incorporates role playing into the treatment process. Psychodrama was invented by Jacob Marino. And Jacob Marino also first coined the term group therapy. Gestalt emphasizes experiments and exercises. There's retroflexion, the act of doing to yourself what you really wish to do to someone else. And that was just like the projection, um, playing the projection technique was acting like the person you dislike. And then it also uses retroflexion, the act of doing to yourself what you really wish to do to someone else. It suggested five layers of neurosis, which must be peeled away to reach emotional stability. So think of an onion, five layers of neurosis, which must be peeled away to reach emotional stability. The phony layer, a phobic layer, that's fear that others will reject his or her uniqueness. The impasse layer, the person feels stuck. I think that's supposed to be the person feels stuck. Implosive layer, the willingness to expose the true self. Explosive layer, person has relief due to authenticity. So first you have your phony layer, the facade that you put up, a phobic layer, a fear that others will reject you and your uniqueness, the impasse layer where you kind of feel stuck. You're like, people will reject me, but I kind of want to be me. And then you have the implosive layer, which you're like willing to expose your true self. Like, yes, I can do it. I want to do it. I can't do it. It'll be okay. And then you have the explosive layer is when the person has relief due to being their true and authentic self. Gestalt believes in unfinished business. Unfinished business are unexpressed emotions such as resentment, rage, guilt, anxiety, etc., which interfere with their present situations and causes difficulties. So, unfinished business is unexpressed emotions that are present and cause difficulties. The principles of Gestalt is insight learning. We have the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect motivated people says that motivated people tend to experience tension due to unfinished tasks, and thus they recall unfinished activities better. So, if you sincerely care about the outcome of a task, you will have better recall of it if it remains incomplete than completed. So pretty much like once you complete a task, it's out of sight, out of mind. Versus if you work on a task little by little, like somebody who's starts homework but then goes to studying and then goes to wash clothes. As you leave those little pieces lingering, then the task will stay on your mind, the Zeigarnik effect. Then you have a five phenomenon. The illusion of movement can be achieved via two or more stimuli which are not moving. Example would be a neon sign that has a moving arrow. So you have a bright sign with a moving arrow. The five phenomenon says that the illusion of movement can be achieved via two or more stimuli which are not moving. So, yeah, I don't know. Gestalt dialogue experiment utilizes concepts from choice theory. So, the Gestalt dialogue experiment utilizes concepts from choice theory. Gestalt assumes that anxiety is often actually stage fright, because remember, psychodrama is important to this one, and paradoxes as well as projection. So, Gestalt assumes that anxiety is often actually stage fright. It assumes the client has internally rehearsed a situation and is worried that his or her performance will not be up to snuff. This rehearsal is said to get in the way of spontaneity and healthy personal experimentation. So it basically says that um, because we are so concerned of our interpretation rather than the experience, we build things up in our head. And that's why we have those five layers of not being, not being our complete self or having to work our way up to our complete self. That's why I just thought wants to emphasize the experience rather than interpretation and then get to a point where you're being your true authentic self. You're no longer, having the stage fright and being afraid of the performance and how people will see you based off what you've rehearsed in your head. So the rehearsal technique especially lends itself to group work, as group members can share their rehearsals with one another, and thus awareness of stage fright and fear of not being accepted by others can be illuminated. So that stage fright is worrying about not saying or doing the right thing. It also has making the rounds strategy, which is a popular group exercise in which the client is instructed to say the same message to everyone in the group. So making the rounds, saying every on the same thing to everyone in the group, like you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful. Is criticized for being anti-intellectual. Gestalt is rather confrontational compared to the Rogerian or person centered. So, because Gestalt is rather confrontational, it makes the client's counselor relationship progress at a slower rate. So it makes the progress happens in the relationship happen at a slower rate because it's a little confrontational. So we have affective, which means emotional. So Gestalt and essential psychotherapy as effective paradigms since they urge clients to purge emotions in order to feel better about themselves. So Gestalt and essential psychotherapy are effective models, emotional models. Gestalt has traditionally been a popular modality for group work. So Gestalt is definitely popular for group work, and we have the rehearsal technique and the making the round strategy. The peak period of competition between the various schools of counseling and therapy, which is Gestalt, behavioristic reality, etc., was during the late 1960s. In the 1970s, biofeedback, behavior modification, and crisis hotlines flourished. That was in the 70s. In the 80s, professionalism was evident. So that was licensing and improvement in professional organizations, which took place in the 80s.